Well, starting a new kind of mini-series today, and I told this story at the beginning of the year when I said I didn't know what I was going to talk about this year. And so I started making this list of words. Remember when I told you? I started making this list of words. I'm like, what am I going to talk about? Just kind of let this unfold for me. And as I looked at that list of words, then I started putting them in little categories, and I thought, wow, this is looking like that's what's going to happen this year. And it was a great start for the last series, which was the power of allow. The power of allow, not to try to make things happen so much as to let it flow and to trust in that. So that's what I've talked about over the last 3 weeks. And today I want to start this little series called The Power of Being. The Power of Being. And then the next little series is going to be The Power of Action. Because it's not just one of these things, and these things don't happen independently. Okay, it's not like, okay, all we have to do is allow everything, so I just need to go home and put my feet up and, everything's going to be okay. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's part of it. And then there's this power of being as well, and there's this power of action as well. So it's the combinations of these things that allow us to have a fulfilled and fulfilling life, right? This life that is fulfilling in the way because it meets our desires and our hopes and our dreams. That's what we're really about. And to be able to fulfill that with joy and ease, all right, and a deep satisfaction, like when you look in the mirror every day, can you imagine saying to yourself at the end of the day, as you're brushing your teeth and getting ready for bed, you look in the mirror and you say, well done, Paula, well done. Wouldn't that be great? Of course, you'd use your own name, doesn't it? Right? She said to use Paula. Or maybe even at the end of your life, right? To think about that. This is one way to use kind of death as my advisor, not to be morbid about it, to say, but to be able to know for yourself, Paula, well done. Well done. That's the kind of life we're after, I think, with that joy and ease and that well done kind of deep satisfaction. And I think to do that, there's 3 questions that I think fit here, and that is, did I love well? Did I live fully? And did I learn to let go? I think those 3 questions. Did I love well? Did I love myself well? Did I love others well? Was I able to exude love more than anything else? Did I live fully? Was I comfortable in my own skin? Was I able to express what it is that I am? Did I live fully for me? And did I learn to let go of all those things that really aren't important? At the end of the day, really what's important. At the end of my life, really what's important. Did I learn to let go of the things that, just weren't that important, really, in the long run? So, in this series, so I think that's what we're after, and that's why I think all these things, whether it's the power of allow, the power of being, or the power of action, that's what we're after. That's what we're after in the end. So in this series, the power of being is about, really what it is how I bring myself to life. Not just that I show up, but it's how I show up to life, how I bring myself to life's moments, okay? Whether it's a meeting I'm going to, whether it's work, whether it's whatever it is, whether it's coming here, whether it's showing up to a family event. The question is, how do I want to be? How do I want to show up to life? How do I do that? How do I want to show up even when it's difficult to show up? When I know that the people there are going to disagree with me? When I know it might not be the most welcoming group, maybe? How do I want to show up to life? That's what this power of being is about, is how I want to show up to life, how I bring myself to life. Because you know what? I think too often we're not conscious enough and we just show up places and then we let our emotions get hijacked by whoever is there, whatever their behavior is and whatever their opinions are. That's what happens to us when we don't consciously decide who and what we want to be. I mean, you don't have to look no further than the local news to know those sorts of things. It's like people get irate at meetings around here, right? Maybe it's you, maybe it's me. We go to this meeting, we know people are going to disagree with us, and then we let ourselves get hijacked by the emotion that's there, instead of deciding beforehand who and how we really want to be, to make that conscious choice. You know, what's happening in our school district has got a lot of people riled. What's happening with the sale of the hospital has got people really riled up. Right here in little old Wilmington, North Carolina. But why should we do that? Shouldn't it be more important that we decide before who we want and how we want to be, and then come from there? Because here's the truth, you know, if we go to one of those places and we get hijacked into anger and rage, who's going to listen to us? They just write us off. They're like, that's a crazy person, but, you know, she's this. What about if we come informed and articulate? What about if we come with passion? Okay? Those sorts of things. What if we do that? Right? Instead of letting ourselves get pulled into the emotion of those sorts of opinions and behaviors of other people. You know, we have that possibility. You know, I have a coaching client who I've been with for quite some time, and after quite some time, probably a decade, and after a couple of years, she said, you know who I really want to be? I really want to be thought of as a wise woman. That's really what I want. I want to be thought of as wise. Like at work, I want to be the one who's grounded. I don't want to be the one who gets, you know, jacked up and torqued up and twisted up over everything that happens. I want to be wise. I want to be thought of as wise. Well, you know, that just doesn't happen because you want it to happen. It's like, well, what happens is, then she worked on it, she had conscious effort in it. So that's really what I want. And after a while, after some years, okay, she finally is wearing that mantle of being the wise one. And people are trusting her and coming to her. And she's so excited, you know, of course, because that's who she wanted to be. That's how she wanted to be. And now she's the one that's grounded in chaos. She's the one that can offer wisdom. Oh, not all the time, right? She is still human. But more often than not, she's the one that's the wise one at work. She's the one that offers that wisdom. So how do you want to be in life circumstances? I mean, that's what you really have to decide. And it has to be a conscious decision before you go there, really. Before you insert yourself in these places, or their tendency is to get sucked into the drama of the moment. Well, that's kind of the idea that I'm talking about in this way of being, is how I want to be in life. But I think there's a few basic ways of being that really set us up to be consistent in how we show up. And because that's really what we want to be. We want to be able to show up consistently to life, right? If we want to be happy, if we want to be at ease in our own self, if we want to be true to who we are, then there are these few ways, these few basic ideas that I want to share with you today that I think are foundational to being able to show up the way we want to show up. And they're powerful because they unleash love and connection and kindness versus division and separation. So here's the first way of being that I think really suits us all, and that is to be humble. To show up to life with humility. And I think it's powerful because when we show up to life with humility, we do not show up with anxiety. We are not worried about looking over our shoulder or worried about what somebody else thinks about us, right? If we are humble, if we are not worried about what somebody else thinks, if we're not worried with anxiety, it gives us a freedom that we can't find anywhere else. It gives us a sense of ease that we can't find if we are trying to control things all the time. To be humble is actually a relief. Think about it that way. Think about being humble as being a relief. It's like, oh, thank goodness. Like I don't have to worry about hiding my imperfections. That's what happens sometimes with us, right? We're like, oh my gosh, I could never do that. I could never let this person know this or that. It's a relief and it's a great freedom. It really takes the edge off of life to be humble. Think about how much effort sometimes we put into, not letting anybody know we're shaking in our shoes. Not letting anybody wanting to buck up, putting that game face on all the time. Think of how much effort we use to do that. Oh my gosh. What about if we didn't? What about if we didn't? There was that quote that I've used from Mark Nepo's book, The Book of Awakening, before, that says, if you spill the soup, just say, hey, I'm sorry I spilled the soup. I don't have to worry about pretending like it didn't happen or defending myself when I know it's not the truth. Yeah? Sometimes we can rely on powering through and our strength, but not always. I think the greatest position to be in is the position of humility, of being humble. Because it's not passive and it's not about letting others take advantage of you. It doesn't mean you're less than in any way when you're humble. It just means this. It means, you know what? I don't get it right all the time. How about that? You know what? I don't get it right all the time. That's the truth. Like, how hard is that to say? Well, if you look at many in the news and in the politics, especially at this time, who would ever admit that they're wrong? Oh my gosh, but it relieves that anxiety. How about if you just admit that you've changed your mind? Like, why should a decision that I made 20 years ago be held over my head today? Like, didn't you grow some in the meantime? Or why should we hold someone else accountable for that? I'm sorry politics is on my mind, but, Joe Biden made a decision 20 years ago. I don't really care about it. Right? I wouldn't want you to hold me responsible for the worst decision I made 20 years ago. Man, I've grown in the meantime, haven't you? I've changed. I've decided to believe something different. And to be humble is to realize that my view of life is limited. It's limited to my perspective. That's what it is. And to accept ourselves that way. I think the best way to assess your level of humility is to think about what happens when something does go wrong for you. When something goes wrong, do you try to hide it? Do you try to cover it up? Do you try to pretend it didn't happen? Do you try to blame somebody else so that nobody finds out about your mistake? Think about that. Think about that. I remember I took a public speaking class one time and with Reverend Margaret Hiller, and she used to feel, she's a great public speaker, by the way, a friend of mine down in Myrtle Beach, and when she was in high school, she took a class, and the teacher told her, Margaret, never go into public speaking. You're terrible at it, right? She's a public speaker today. She was taking a class, and one of her biggest fears was for someone to come in to the lecture that she was giving and tell her she had no idea what she was talking about. And she feared that a lot. She feared that a lot. You know what happened one time? When she was speaking to a big audience in an auditorium, some protesters came in the back and yelled out, "You have no idea what you're talking about. You're not qualified to talk about this." Right? So what do you do at those points in time when somebody's calling you out? When you made a mistake, or a piece of toilet paper stuck on my foot up here, what am I doing? Trying to hide it? And going over here and pretend it didn't happen? What do you do? It reveals something about your humility. Let me read you this from the Book of Joy, a conversation between the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu that speaks to this. The Dalai Lama saying, when I was very young in Lhasa, I used to receive copies of the American magazine called Life. One issue had a picture of Princess Elizabeth, the future Queen of England, at some very big official function. The princess was reading a message with Prince Philip by her side, and the wind had blown Her Majesty's skirt like that, and he puffed out his robes and showed Desmond Tutu what it meant. He said, both Princess Elizabeth and Prince Philip pretended like nothing happened, but an American photographer took the picture. And when I saw that picture, he said, I laughed. I really thought it was funny. Sometimes, especially in formal occasions, people act as if they're different and special. But we all know that we're all the same. We're ordinary human beings, aren't we? Why do I try to hide it? What am I afraid of? Okay? If you were to assess your own humble nature, think about how you are when something goes wrong for you. And if you try to hide it or blame someone else for the mistake. If you're afraid to admit your imperfections, if you're afraid to say, you know what? I spilled the soup. I'm sorry. That was me. So what are the attributes of humility? I have a few here I want to share with you. So I was thinking about this for myself. Like, what are the attributes? What are the things that I can look at for myself and say, is this the way I am? Most of the time? Some of the time? Is this where I need some work? Well, I've already mentioned one of them, and that is, you know what? You get it wrong sometimes. I get it wrong sometimes. I don't get it right all the time. Like, just say it. It's the truth. I think to be humble is to know when to ask for help and to graciously receive it as well. To graciously receive it and not to be so righteously independent all the time, but to ask for help. To accept criticism, to listen to it and decide, is this true? Instead of blaming the person for saying something to you. Why don't you just listen to it? Maybe it's the truth. Maybe it's something that you need to hear. Maybe it'll be useful to you. Maybe it'll be useful to me. A humble person accepts criticism. Accepts criticism. Finds joy in the success of others. Yeah. That whole comparison thing and, somebody getting ahead of you and all that. Oh my gosh, we need to get over that. A humble person finds joy in the success of others. It's not a competition. When I am humble, I am not always seeking the spotlight, and I recognize that everything that I have accomplished in my life stands on the shoulders of someone that came before me. Everything. We don't think that way all the time, but I think if we are humble, we recognize that that's the truth. That there's nothing that I've accomplished on my own, quote unquote. There's someone or someone's, more than one, that's come before us, that we're standing on their shoulders. When I'm humble, I'm not such a harsh critic. I'm not such a harsh critic. We have no idea of what someone else is going through. None. We think we do. We like to make up a story about it. And we think we know, but we really don't. And we need to admit that. A humble person decides, you know what? I really don't know the truth about that. I don't know the whole story. Heck, it's hard to keep track of my own story, let alone to know the story of someone else. And one other thing about being humble is that there's a sense that we're connected. There's this sense of oneness. There's this sense of spiritual connection, like we're in this together, like we're human after all, and we're not different than each other. And when we can see with that sense, we have a more humble countenance. We have a more humble nature. That's what I think about humility. And to check my own self. Am I humble? Do I bring myself to life that way? I think it's foundational. And out of humility comes the second foundational idea, and that is showing up as our authentic self. As our authentic self, as who we are unapologetically with humility. In our uniqueness and our essential nature with humility. You see how that fits together? Not overlording someone else or not better than, but to show up exactly as who we are and how we are with humility. To be authentic, to not hide the truth of who we really are and who we want to be. What I wear, how I carry myself, what I do in life, how I am, to be unapologetic about it and to be humble, both at the same time. So when you show your authentic nature, you're not worried about that comparison factor. You're not worried about how it looks to somebody else. But because you are humble, you can show up authentically without apology. Knowing that you matter, knowing that what you have to say is important, that your presence here is essential. So those two ideas, I invite you to think about this week. about how I show up as humble and how I show up as my authentic self, and to not fear that in any way. So let's take those ideas into meditation this afternoon. And you're invited to come up on the pillow if that's what you want. So let's take a deep breath together, in and out. And this is where these ideas of allow and being can come together. Let's just allow this idea of being humble, this idea of humility, this idea of authenticity in me. Let me just sit with that for a while. Let me just sit and know from the inside to be revealed to me, my humble nature, how I show up authentically. How I'm not afraid to be who I am and how I am with humility. And how essential that is. Essential not just for me, but for humanity as well. accept myself as I am, to see myself, to like myself, to know that I am worthy, that I am special, that I am whole. Guide me to allow myself the freedom to be imperfect, as the leaf, the flower, the tree, each having many colors and shapes, each having great beauty, all perfect in their glorious imperfections as created by your divine design. God, I want to see myself as you have created me, through your eyes, the eyes of love. I want to release my fear and return to the seed of my soul, to the sacred space of love, so that I may connect with you and see the light that is acceptance. Receive me and guide me, O beloved, so that I may return to the light that glows within me, so that I may awaken to the love that resides within me. With this prayer I sit in your embrace.